and having people connect with their healthy exhibitionism, to their healthy enthusiasm. Christians talk about joy. We talk about it more than we experience it. But that's what that's about. Joy is an experience of healthy exhibitionism, and knowing that the true God loves it. The image of the true God in Jesus is the dancer. In fact, if you look at the archetypal king throughout world mythology, what does the king do? He dances the world into existence. In fact, if you see that movie, Richard Gere, of all things, as King David, I thought that was wild. But one of the true things was those dance scenes. If you study the history of kingship, you know that they dance the world into existence. They don't force it into existence. They don't coerce it into existence. They dance it into existence. Shiva, in the images of the great king Shiva, he's seen as dancing the world. And that is the human birthright. See, and Christians at their deepest level understand that, but they've never actualized it very well. Jesus got too much flack about that, and they decided that was dangerous business. The issue that you've got to deal with is the question of Jung's assertion, which I totally agree with, that there are many things in the psyche, including the archetypal self, which you do not integrate. You do not integrate the archetypal self. You try to integrate the archetypal self, and you will be crazy. And to the extent that you are crazy, it is to the extent that you're already doing it and don't know it. See? In other words, if you tend to be an abusive male or female and tend to lord it over others, you are, whether you know it or not, you're acting out the God King or the God Queen. And see, human beings are supposed to be in touch. The ego is supposed to be in touch with the God King and Queen, not acting it out. See? If you're in touch with the energies of the God King and God Queen, then you will be centered. I'll go into all the things tomorrow I'll go into all the things that happen when you're in touch with that deep center of the psyche, because they're directly related to Christian virtues in terms of the past understanding of Christian virtues. But you must not get into some unconscious possession, because when you do, you become the narcissistic personality disorder. The narcissistic personality disorder is someone who is possessed by this sacral kingship within. And lording it over other people is a good way to say it. They think they are the Lord. Yes.
This may be going beyond what you'd like to discuss, but are you open to the possibility that the archetypal shadow, though it's inappropriate for an individual ego to encounter, may be the problem of the collective race, and that it might be that its redemption will occur over a period of time by its encounter with any number of egos?
Well, that's very complicated. I'm one of the group of people that believes that there is a growing human consciousness, and that human consciousness, as it grows on the planet, is not tribal. That is, tribalism in thought processes is lessened more and more and more. It's not so totally engendered, simply in one gender or the other. It's not racial. So there is a sense in which the more human consciousness matures, that the human beings have less trouble with possession by the archetypal self. See, so I would agree with that part of it. But it's a lot more complicated than that, because there are these. You've got the combat myth that's in the deep unconscious that the ego can resolve in its own way for itself, but it can't resolve for the objective psyche. See, I mean, it may be, I don't know what to think about all this, it may be that you human beings are going to solve God's problems, but I wouldn't recommend for your ego to try to resolve in your own little life the conflicts of the objective psyche. To me, I've seen too many people trying to do that. And they're almost all addicts, of one kind or the other. We'll get into that a lot more tomorrow. But anyway, this whole issue now, you see, I want to reiterate now, the psychodynamics of evil, I will argue adamantly, because there is mythological support for this, there is comparative psychoanalytic support for it from diverse schools that don't agree on much anything else, that the mechanism of human destructiveness is pathological infantile grandiosity. The little Lord Fauntleroy on his high chair tyrant, his high chair throne, that is the fuel, or the female version of that. Now, the question that you rightfully raise and you need to think about during this conference, because you will have to come down somewhere eventually on this, the question is, how do you explain that in terms of Jungian psychology of the self and the ego? Well, you've seen one version of that, the necessity for the ego-self axis. That is, you must not identify with the archetypal self in any of its forms. Because if you identify with it, you will be overloaded. Your circuit breakers are going to go. And as we will see tomorrow, you're going to start having compulsive behaviors. Compulsive behaviors of any kind are a sign your circuits are overloaded. And your defenses are not working anymore. And so you're getting into acting out something that you are not. But in Jungian psychology, there are different approaches to this, and the different ways you would locate or talk about evil. Now, it seems to me the simplest way to talk about the psychology of evil in Jungian terms is just to be very clear that whatever else you say, it is inflation. And whatever else you say, it is when the human ego attempts to take into itself energies which are not human. They are too numinous for the human. Now, remember what I said. I want you to take in all the numinosity that is appropriate to your humanness. I want you to glow. I'd like for you to shine. See? I want you to be creative. I want you to be enthusiastic. I want you to be filled up with yourself. I don't want you to be bored with yourself for life. So there's some numinosity that is appropriately human. That's the imago Dei, I think. But evil will occur, clinically speaking, not in terms of some meta theory, but clinically speaking, when you start trying to absorb into your ego energies that are not absorbable into your ego. And so that's inflation. But now let's get into this thing. Well, now, what causes this evil that you see in the psyche, this destructiveness? Is this the fault of the self? Now, the Jungians are all over the place on this. And let me just show you some of the options, and you probably can think of other options this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the options. You can say that with Jung, that the archetypal self includes archetypal evil. That you've got Christ. You look at those charts he gives you in the volume Ion. A-I-O-N. Archetypal self, you've got Christ and Satan as structures of the self. And so you can say, well, both good and evil are in the self, and then some theorists, Jung, as John has pointed out, Jung kind of identifies that the Godhead itself contains good and evil, as sort of a parallel to the archetypal self. Sometimes they equate the self and God. Some Jungians talk as if the archetypal self and God are pretty much the same thing. You might say that sometimes that they might argue that human evil then may be, some of it at least, done at the initiative of the archetypal self. And some of them even say even done at the initiative of God. Now, then you get a position something like Jack Sanford's, where there is sometimes a kind of a tendency to equate the self and God, but he doesn't really finally land there. The archetypal self is an expression sometimes of God in the psyche, but